Hi there, I'm Timothy Linsdau, video producer, Christian, and also amateur science seeker, if you will. Recently I've been watching some documentaries on the 50th anniversary of space flight and landing on the moon. One I saw last night was on balloons and the research and records that were set by different people before much of the space race began. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, before we start, like and comment on my video, if you will, and subscribe to my channel to support my channel. Thank you. Well, anyway, there are multiple people that were involved in high altitude ballooning, if you will. And there were some back in the 30s. Orville Anderson and Albert Stevens managed to ascent to 74,000 feet, and that was in 1935. So it was pretty astounding already. What they were, of course, looking for is the effect it would have on people in research. I think the thing that surprised me, at least in their documentary, was that getting budgets, money for space exploration, was actually considered foolish, or should we say more of a Buck Rogers legend. They saw no reason for it, no benefit for it. This wasn't everybody, of course, but even the military, many in government in the 50s just felt it was just a wild goose chase, which was kind of surprising because, of course, I look at that from history now of all the things that have happened from space exploration. It was just surprising, but until the Soviets put up the first satellite and multiple other things they went on to do at first, of course, motivated America from the Cold War issues and fear of where the Russians might be going with this, really stepped up their space program. Even though we had, grabbed the scientists at the end of World War II, Wernher von Braun and others, and at the end of the war to bring them to our side, if you will, to work on rocketry. Of course, that was based on missile technology and the ability to deliver a weapon payload at certain distances, at certain speeds, and that's what that they could comprehend in military was a weapon. But actually getting out into space and exploring, that didn't quite come till later. So, but some of the things that you learn about space is that at its 63,000 feet altitude, the human being's blood will boil, which of course is going to kill you. It's going to block your blood flow. 90,000 feet, the atmosphere is pushing minus 100 degrees below zero. So either blood's going to boil or you're going to freeze to death. So you're going to have to do some serious work. So of course, by that time, pressurized suits had been developed. So they understood that if you were inside a pressurized suit, you could survive these extremes, and get through them. But the idea of using high altitude balloons, which in the beginning they had very, very low budgets, very little support, but many felt it was a place to be the first effort of going into space, and it is considered the first, let's put it this way, the first men to go into space were actually balloonists, getting up to high enough to actually start seeing the curvature of the Earth, approaching, it's a death-defying act actually, but all the things that they learned from doing that eventually made its way into the beginning of the space race, because they started to understand the effects of high altitude, and then reaching the fringes of space, it gave them information they would need for the future. There are a number of interesting stories about different people that were involved. One of them was Dr. John Paul Stapp, and he was one that worked. Well, for one thing, he discovered how to avoid the bends by pre-breathing 100% oxygen, a method that's used by astronauts today. But this Stapp was involved in the balloon testing all the way into the Mercury project. With NASA, did a lot of research and for the space race. And he was involved in rocket sled tests about the number of G's a human being could survive. And so rather than, he said, I didn't want to end up killing a poor sergeant that I would be blamed for. He says, so I decided to do all of these tests himself, which he did. And some of them are pretty crazy. In fact, he says, he says, I usually always followed orders, but when they found out how dangerous some of these were, he was ordered to stop. But so he says, well, I followed orders unless they just didn't make any sense. But one thing, I think, to reach the highest speed ever in G's, he was on a rocket sled, went 630 miles an hour, and stopped within a second and a half in a water dam or water break, and exceeded, because original science thought that humans could not stand anything above 18 G's, but he approached 48 G's and survived. When they first got him out of the rocket sled, he was blind and was afraid he would be permanently blind, but he wasn't. It was the only ill health he had, and it recovered rather rapidly. So, some wild experience. It's not just the fanciness of the rockets and the fire and the noise of the rockets and shuttle, but they actually have a very quiet system of testing with the balloon history, except for Stapp's work on the rocket sleds. But there are multiple records set. One was by David Simmons, first person to reach 100,000 feet in a capsule under a helium balloon. August 19th, 1957, he rose to 101,500 feet. And this, of course, was to study the effects on the human body. The flight that he was on demonstrated that pilots could survive the space environment physically, emotionally, and the success played a significant role in John F. Kennedy's ultimate decision to go to the moon. So, a lot of these things happened really quickly in their research, going from, no, we're not going into space, that's Buck Rogers stuff, to actually setting a goal to reach the moon before the 60s was out. And very, very quick decisions to do these things. And I'm sure the Cold War had a big part of doing that. One thing that happened during the balloon test, they eventually wanted to test what would happen to a human being if they jumped out of a balloon at over 100,000 feet. And the first one to do that was Joe Kittinger, and he rode a balloon to about 102,800 feet, and then he jumped out, and it was the sensation at that, he said, was interesting because they're silent because there's so little atmosphere to slow you or to make any noise at all. So to see the beauty, he said, of the curve of the Earth, the blackness of the beginning of space, and the separation of Earth color was fascinating. And he actually fell at the speed of sound, which that's really incredible, because there was nothing to really slow him down until the air starts to thicken and slow you down. One of the things that was part of the testing is they discovered if falling from high altitudes, you could start to spin, and it was more of a death spin because you would eventually pass out and you couldn't open your chute. And he was testing a 3-stage stabilization parachute system, what contributed to later in space flight. This balloon system kept you from spinning, and that was really important. There was a time where in one of these falls he did pass out, but I'm sorry, I can't quite remember that. But in that process, they had an automatic opening chute that saved him. So, but this death spin, you can end up making 200 revolutions per minute. So you can see that just wouldn't be too good. But anyway, it was fascinating stuff that they did in balloons, and that they still do in balloons today. It was kind of forgotten with all the fascination with the Wright stuff and the Mercury 7 and all of that. These guys were forgotten, and they really were the first spacemen. The first people in space were in balloons. And all that initial testing went to help accelerate the space program in the U.S. So, check out some of that history on balloons. It's pretty fascinating stuff. The first lighter and air balloon was in the 18th century in, I believe, France. So it's come a long way since then. But anyway, some fascinating history. It's a good time to be looking into it in this 50th anniversary. There's a lot of stuff out there. So enjoy a little science, Like and comment on my video. Subscribe to support my channel. Get out there, and just make it a great day.